Hi everybody, I'm here to answer your questions on the webinar, and I've got them all printed off in front of me here. And I'm just going to answer them as honestly as I can and the best way that I can, and I'm having a cup of tea while I do that. So here we go. The first webinar question is, Deanne, how do you finish a mat with a curvy edge? How much backing edge do you leave for folding over? Do you ever snip into the edge in order to ease it around a curve? If you snip it, do you use anything like some kind of glue to stabilizing the backing thread so that your backing doesn't unravel? That is a really good question. Let me see. Let me think. Okay. I like to, on smaller pieces, first of all, there's a difference between small pieces and big pieces. So if a small piece has a curvy edge, then I don't mind using glue. But if a big piece has a curvy edge, I'm always careful to make my edges so that they're not jig-jaggy and pointed like this, but they're more rounded like this. So with the rounded edges, I personally, I don't like to use glue on larger pieces. Once in a while I will if I'm framing them or something, but I'd like to leave about 1.5 to 2.5 inches, just depending on how much backing material you have, and then I kind of roll it under and just where it goes in deep into the points, then like then I'll try and roll it, and then I'll overlap the fold. Does that make sense? So like if I'll fold it once as if I was hemming it, and then sometimes in a curved area you have to take the fold and fold it over again on itself again, and that's how I do it. I try not to use glue. So that was from Barb Pratt. This is from Nancy. I just started rug hooking this summer. I love the look of your rugs, the loose, carefree style. I'd like to hook like that. I seem to crowd my stitches. Packing, I think they call it. Each sample, I seem to continue to do this. This is my style or something I need to correct. I don't think it is something you need to correct unless you're packing so tight that if you're packing so tight that your mat won't lay flat, you have a problem. If you want a looser style, one of the activities I suggest for people is to sit like this with their hand, and as they're hooking, take the hook, and so here's the hand with the hook in it, right? And this is the motion that you're using when you're hooking. Now, as you're hooking, I would say get out your frame and your wool and close your eyes and hook, you know? Do some activities like that. Hook to music. Get a small area and just sort of play with it. Just fill it in as fast as you can. Fill it in with your eyes closed. These kinds of activities will loosen up your stitches. It's just like drawing activities. Oops, I forgot to mention my question about cutting sweaters should go to the webinar. So there was a question about cutting sweaters. So this is really simple. A sweater depends on the weave, right? So I sometimes, if you cut it along, like up and down the sweater, you'll get one kind of cloth. If you cut it across the sweater, you'll get another kind of a cloth, and they'll do different things. So I like to, first of all, I like to wash sweaters, and then I am always careful about drying them. I so often have shrunk them too much by throwing them in the dryer. And even washing them, just make sure you wash them in cool water, not hot water, because sweaters will felt quite easily. Then I dry them, just throw them over, a door to dry or whatever. And then I cut them apart, and I usually cut the sleeves off, cut the collar off, and so on a sweater, sometimes you have the ribbed edges, like of the cuffs, and the rib around the base of the sweater. That gives you one kind of cloth, and I usually cut that around, of course, on the round. The arms I usually cut up and down, and the sweater itself, the body of the sweater, I usually cut across. But I do try it both ways, and I think there isn't a right way and a wrong way. For most art, there isn't a right way and a wrong way, because art is about discovery, and it's about trying different things, and when you try different things, you get different results. So when I cut them, I use scissors. I always use scissors. Some of them do ravel a bit, and a lot of times sweaters curl. Every cloth does something different, so you have to learn what each cloth will do. And I cut them up probably on, I would say it's a number 10. It's usually quite a wide cut that I use for sweaters. My question, Deanne, pertains to wool roving. Should I avoid using it in rugs because it could wear out too quickly? From Sheila Swanland. No, I don't think so. But if you're putting it on the floor, you have to understand that every material is going to react differently to walking on. So wool roving, some people make it's not going to wear out. It's going to last really a good long time, but it's going to flatten. It's going to flatten out, and it's going to be lower than the wool cloth. So when you put rugs on the floor, they do different things. So from the walking on it. So if you're making a rug for the floor, you might want to consider that. Maybe it won't bother you. It would bug me a little bit if there was roving in one area of the rug and that got flatter than the other areas of the rug where I used cloth. Could we talk a little about the preparation of secondhand fabrics? This is from Alora. For use in our mats. For example, I found a 100% cashmere sweater, but it's stretchy. Ooh, get it? Sounds good to me. Must I do something to make it, or can I use it as is stretchy? Yes, you can use it as it is stretchy. Stretchy's good. You know, you have to find the right place for it. But say if it's a green cashmere sweater and it's stretchy and you cut it nice and wide and you're hooking bushes or you're hooking a landscape, it's just the perfect thing. It's a rare thing. So some fabrics in fact, I found most now ravel and seem to have quite a lot of stringy edges that are visible when I pull it through. How do you convert your finds into usable fabric? Okay, that is a very sensible question, Laura. That's what you said. I hope this question makes sense, and it does. I think some fabrics aren't much good, or some fabrics are good for a certain area of a mat, like very thin fabrics. Even though they're 100% wool, we don't bother with them too much. I keep some for my own hooking, and I cut it maybe an inch and a half wide because I like it, you know. But a lot of people don't enjoy hooking with it. The preparation of secondhand fabrics is this: always take all your wool apart, then wash it and dry it, however you see fit. Know what needs to be hand cut, like things that are stretchy and they just shred in the cutter, really. So know what needs to be hand cut, and just learn what to buy. Avoid buying those things that you don't enjoy hooking with. And you know, some people do enjoy hooking with those really thin fabrics, and they fold them over and they hook them flat, and like they'll take a wider piece and they'll fold it and hook it. I don't, but you know, I have seen people hook with those. How do you manage working on large rugs? How do you handle all the extra backing that is not on your frame? I have a Shedicamp frame that has 6-foot long bars on it, so all my backing is drawn tight. Do you ever sew an extra backing onto rugs that will be used onto the floor? Some people do that. I haven't, but you could easily sew like another layer of backing onto it if you wanted to. Like you could sew a piece of wool cloth over the back of it. It would work perfectly fine, Mara. And that's Myra White. As for if you're using a lap frame and you have a lot of extra backing, it is kind of a nuisance, Myra, because I find it's something that you trip up in almost. So big rugs need frames, but I have seen people roll up the rug, roll up the burlap and sort of pin it so that they're not dealing with the whole backing at the same time. You could even put a string through, like you could sort of loop a string through the burlap and tie it so that you're not, and just do it like panel by panel. But it will get heavy as you're working on it. This is from Claire, and she says, I thought I had a fairly large stash of wool to choose from to make my rug, but as I go, I realize I could use more and more colors. Oh, Claire, I know, I understand. I've been collecting for quite a while, and timing was perfect for this course. How best to store the wool? Mounting is something else to know more about. I bought the Shedicamp metal parts and put together a frame as best I could. Is there any more information available about the Shedicamp frame? Thanks for an inspirational time. I love my things. I like things that inspire me journal. I also love taking a walk and looking at everything as color and not necessarily shape. I'm very happy with how much work I've done because I'm looser now with my loop, so all is good. Claire, I'm glad to hear it. Okay, well, storing wool, I think what's really important is that you not, throw it in a bag in the basement. Your wool has to be accessible, you have to be able to see it, and it has to be protected from moths. So you have to, use whatever it is that works for you, mothballs, or we use a product from mothcontrol.com. It's It's just a pheromone trap that catches moths before they actually get at our wool. Um, uh, that's what I use. And moths are an issue for everybody, pretty much. I don't know. Maybe there's some states where you have no problem with them, or if you're in a really cold state. So you could, but storing wool, it's really important that it's stored so that you can see it. So I don't really believe in the Rubbermaid tub method. No offense to Rubbermaid. Um, or but you know, plastic bags are good if you need to, but if you can store it open in open shelvings. I have those cube shelves in my studio that I really like, and I really like seeing them that way. um, as for the Shedicamp frame, we do have a little video online as to how to put it together, and we have pictures of it, and then we send you the measurements come with that. I don't really have much more to say about it. It's a really old style frame. It's been around since probably the 20s or before. It was designed in Shedicamp, Cape Breton, and it's just, we have them handmade by a local man, so it's not something that you're going to find everywhere. When you finish small mats like the 4x6 mini scenes for sale, do you sew sleeves on the backing for hanging? How do you prep them for hanging? No, I don't. I do never, ever, ever sew sleeves on the back for hanging, because I don't like the way that rod makes a bump in the hanging. I can't stand it. So no, I don't. I just hand sew them, and then we use mat pins or some kind of little pin and push it through the wall into the gyprock. Or you can put a nail in the wall, and where I hand sew the binding over it, it will, when I hand sew the binding over it, you can lay that binding over the nail, and that will work. When you steam a rug that has lots of different materials in it, wool, fleece, silk yarns, in addition to the unevenly hooked wool strips, thank you for noticing, Barb, they are unevenly hooked. How do you do it when you are finished that everything still has a soft and evenness? Do you actually rest the yarn on the rug, and do you fluff up the textures again? Yes, I do. I give it a good steam pressing with a hot cloth, a hot iron, and a really wet piece of cotton, and then after it's done, I'll just hand comb it, sort of like this, and it works great. Just comes right back to life. Dear Deanne, my training is as a traditional fine cut hooker and a McGowan certified teacher. I'm very good at color planning. This must have been difficult for you probably sometimes. I'm very good at color planning and technique, but find it difficult to color outside the lines. Rather than portraying the essence of a scene, I have a strong inclination to make the subject matter look realistic. I focus on detail rather than the overall view. The exercises and projects in this class have been very helpful in learning to let go. Any other suggestions would be appreciated. Okay, well, let's see. If I wanted to help you with that, what would I say to you if you want to color outside the lines? Well, that activity that I mentioned about closing your eyes and hooking, just to loosen up a little, that would be a good thing. If you like to focus on detail, you can still, I still like detail, even though, like in my landscape scenes, I still like detail. You can still have areas of detail, and then you can mix the two styles together if you want it. And it's quite incredible how beautiful that can look. For example, if you were doing a fish and you did a lot of detail on the belly of the fish, but then outside of that. So, I don't think you should throw out your McGowan training with, not that you would anyway, but that's certainly not the way that I teach. I think, how can you incorporate that and this together, and do you want to? And if you want to, then so I would look at ways that I can add detail, and I would look at ways that I can add detail and use what I know from my other training, because I do that all the time. I look at what I can add from other areas of my learning into this areas of learning. So I look at painters, for example, and what I know about using a brush strokes, and I add that into my hooking. So I try not, like, my goal really isn't to change people or change their style or change their learning. It's just to sort of introduce them to the way that I do things, and with this course, and to sort of say, okay, is there anything in here that you want to carry forward? And if if you like to make things realistic, then I think that there's lots of room for this here too, and finding ways of taking the primitive style and making it more realistic. So this isn't the primitive style in the traditional sense, is it? It's a bit different than that. And Pamela, thank you for that question. It's a very interesting question. I have designed a few beginner patterns for students, but have not designed any for myself. I plan to take your design class next year. Any suggestions for preparing for that class? So one of the design, we're doing Wild with Style next, which does have a lot of design elements into it, and that starts in mid-November. I'd encourage all of you to keep going and go forward with it. It's a great class, and it's really about design and creativity and about um, pushing yourself. So I would encourage you to take it. We're starting mid-November, and in preparing for that, oh, the sketchbook is the tool that you're going to be really needing, and your eyes, and looking and seeing and gathering ideas and thoughts, and sort of really, I mean, I guess I know that when I started rug hooking, my eyes they just went wide open, and I'll never forget that, and I feel it now in learning how to knit a little bit. I sort of see how, I'm all of a sudden looking at knitting structurally. When I started rug hooking, I started looking at the world structurally, like the landscape in layers and houses as shapes, and it just opened up a whole world for me. So I think it's your eyes and your sketchbook, Pamela, that we need you to really get in touch with. The webinar question: does wool yarn wear as well as wool strips or cut from fabric? If you use wool yarn in a rug, can it be used as a floor rug, or should it be used for wall art pieces? No, you can. A wool yarn floor rug, you could use all wool yarn and it will wear really, really well. Like if you look at, for example, carpets from Iran or the Middle East or North Africa, they're hooked with wool yarn. They will last and last and last. There's no problem. Wool is wool. However, they do wear differently, and they flatten out, with a different patina than wool cloth. So they're both very good. And that was from Shirley. Mary Park at AOL.com. So this is from Mary. When you hook your landscapes, are you seeing the landscape in your mind's eye and hooking shapes and colors with that reality in mind, or do you just go with the flow of the wool using contrast and color to create the feel of the place? I do both, to be quite honest. Actually, I just left my studio and I was hooking a landscape there. I have a little tiny studio room in my house that has great light that I love. And some of you will see some of it in the Wild with Style course, actually. When you hook landscapes, are you seeing the landscape in your mind's eye? I am. I'm imagining like a bigger place, and I'm imagining, acres of land and how it might look. But I'm also responding to the wool that's on my frame and the wool that's in my studio, so it is a combination of things. And do you dye colors to get what you think you want the landscape to look like, or do you mostly reach from your stash and use what you have? I definitely reach from my stash. We're always dyeing here, so there's always new dyed wools, and there's always lots of opportunities to see new wool, and I do use it and see what's coming up out of the dye pot and take it, and it's often the wool itself that might inspire, or a particular yarn that will inspire me. Do any of your rugs become floor rugs, or are they all wall hangings? Well, now look, I definitely make my rugs for the floor too. I just believe that no mat and no artist is ever too good to make a rug for the floor. That's our whole history. That's what we're about, and it's a wonderful tradition, and I love it. What is your recommendation for how to hang a rug? Curtain rods, nails. I use these mat pins. I'll look around my desk if I can find one. Lordy, 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 let me find one. Come on. There's one here. There I am. Okay, these are from, look at it. Let's see if I can show you. Oh, there we go. This is a very honest webinar. It's like that. And it's about a half an inch. And there it is. Yeah. Any of you are dentists, you're getting a good look at my mouth here. I'm sorry. There we go. All right. This is the mat pin, and I just push those right through a hole in the burlap. And say if it's a really large, if it's a 30-pound rug, obviously I'm going to put some nails on the wall and lay the binding over the nails. But I use these little pins to sort of straighten it out and flatten it out. I don't like curtain rods, and I do use nails and sometimes hang the thing over the nails. You'll be really surprised at how well those mat pins work. Do you moth-proof your wool rugs? No, I don't. I don't know how exactly you would do that. I mean, I guess you could spray them with Raid or something. Do you protect your stash? Yes, I do protect my stash, and I'm very diligent. I spend a lot of money each year on pheromone traps, and I'm quite happy to do it. Do you ever use a camera for your research or inspiration? Yeah, but mostly my iPhone. I just keep it in my pocket. It's always with me. I used to carry a big camera around with me. I just found it was too cumbersome. With the new iPhone, I have an iPhone 5, and it has a decent camera on it. It's not great for like publishing or anything, but it's great for the internet, and I'm sure it would be even better if I had better control over it. A couple of guidelines for hooking people faces, please. I just choose three. If you're just starting, just choose 3 tans that are close together and use those. We do have a whole workshop on hooking people. It starts in January. It's going to start in January. Have you ever used embellishment on your rugs, buttons or beads? I have once in a while. I don't love that look. I just find you don't really need it. You can get interesting things happening with the wool. Um, I just find it can be a little tacky sometimes, and I just think it's hard to know what's tacky and what's really nice sometimes when you're dealing with embellishment. So no offense if you like embellishment, but it's just how I feel. And so I have, yes, over the years used things, and I haven't loved it. How important is the original drawing of the border I'm backing is precisely square and straight to weave? It isn't particularly important. What is important is that your rug is a square or a rectangle or whatever shape you want it to be. So as long as you measure, like from if you're doing something 20 by 20, as long as it's 20 by 20 this way and 20 by 20 that way, and you check it with your ruler, then if it's a little off of the grid, it doesn't really matter, especially if you're hooking, it will still be a square when you cut it out and you hang it. Some people like to hook on a grid, and sometimes we've had issues with that with people, and they the grid is really important to them, and that's the way they hook, and they like their patterns to be on a grid. And so we make sure that they choose Scottish burlap and that we can put it on a grid for them. How do you determine what backing to use? If it's small and decorative, I love primitive burlap. It's $4.95 a yard. It's perfect. If it's bigger and